Strange encounters are common in Star Trek, and sometimes they go beyond strange and enter into downright creepy, eerie, or unnerving territory. There are plenty of surreal images or events in Star Trek episodes that make for tense or haunting moments, but these picks are the ones that maintained that for longer than usual, or were themed around those spooky events. So join me, because I don't want to go alone, and looking at my top 9 scariest episodes of Star Trek. Sometimes it's great to just witness a good survival zombie flick, and we got this, more or less, with Enterprise's Impulse. The Starfleet vessel stumbles across a derelict Vulcan science ship adrift in the Expanse, which is the perfect setting for some survival horror. The Expanse itself is already a freaky place with a myriad of dark, reality-twisting effects, and when the Enterprise encounters a potential ally amid all this chaos and ill fortune, perhaps there is a chance to save some lives and recruit some needed aid. Not so. What follows is a series of events as the away team try to escape the crumbling vessel pursued by zombie-like Vulcans whose minds have been destroyed by Trellium-D exposure. And what's more, we get variations on the zombie bite-infected ally when T'Pol begins to succumb to the same poisoning as the rest of the crew, and her state is gradually declining throughout the show. What's more, we actually would go on to see repercussions of this episode in later Enterprise, as the vessel was destroyed in its entirety and T'Pol's revisiting of the Trellium exposure during this story arc. Ultimately, this sort of horror to me is less scary and more cool, but I thought it was done rather well with a sci-fi twist. Empok Nor begins as a simple repair job to DS9, where replacement components are needed, so a small engineering and salvage team travel over to Empok Nor to obtain the needed parts. However, there is an issue. Cardassian soldiers have been callously abandoned on the station in suspended animation and awaken to defend it from intruders. But these soldiers were abandoned to such a fate because they had been exposed to a psychotropic chemical to increase their xenophobic tendencies. What follows is the hunting of the away team by these soldiers, until Garak manages to take them out. However, he too was exposed to the compound and soon indulges in his darker impulses to toy with and engage in a life-or-death battle of wits with Chief Miles O'Brien. The tension present in this episode is always high, and throwing in the classic isolated setting, and you have an eerie game of survival. For me though, the true fright in this episode is seeing just what the humble tailor Garak is truly capable of, and witnessing this amiable but dangerous character degrade into short-term insanity leaves a lingering awareness that Garak is far more than he claims to be. In a similar vein, but with a single lurking enemy, is the Voyager episode Juggernaut. This has a small crew making their way through a Malon vessel on the brink of lethal rupture, while they are hunted by a creature called the Vihar. We already had the tension of the vessel on the verge of catastrophic damage, but when the crew are attacked by this lurking monster, repairing the ship becomes even harder. The legend of the Vihar is a creature who stalks the lower irradiated decks of Malon waste export vessels and is responsible for all sorts of sabotage and even injuries to the crew. With the dim lighting, murky smoke-filled air and ambient noise obscuring the senses, it's not hard to picture such an entity lurking in the gloom to prey upon lone core labourers. The twist to this tale being that the Vihar is a heavily irradiated, vengeful and insane Malon is one of many times in Star Trek where a myth, even aliens ones, are given understanding and explained. However, I would say that this is one of the few instances where even understanding and knowing the threat, it is not diminished. Sometimes the fear of the unknown is not lessened with knowledge, and even if there is an element of sympathy involved, the threat is still very much there. Night. Night is a strange one for me. Not exactly scary or spooky, but unnerving in its concept. The ship has to pass through a void where no starlight reaches the ship, and it's a journey that will take about 2 years. And already it has been several months, and the crew is getting stir-crazy. With the complete lack of outside influence, there is quite simply nothing to occupy them. No stars to map, nothing to chart, no scans to run, only general ship maintenance to perform, leaving the rest of the crew to idle away. This led many of them to observe personal projects or make extensive use of the holodecks, but even this has limits, and with nothing to do and no possibility of stepping outside the ship to visit a planet or an away mission, it's a dour mood. When nothing external can occupy the mind, it turns inwards, and this is the state we find the crew in. Melancholy, frustrated, and more than anything, bored. Boredom can be scary, something I would have never have thought had we globally not had a small taster of isolation with the lockdown and so on. Let's just say that I have a new appreciation for this episode, even if the actual creature of the week turns out not to be that much of a threat. The introduction of Species 8472 was done for me in a terrifying fashion. The reveal that there was a threat out there that even the Borg were afraid of, coupled with the telepathic flashes of these extra-dimensional intruders adding to their menace, followed by their unnatural appearance. Well, they were designed to have like 3 legs because such an evolution is not really seen in the natural world. Limbs tend to develop in pairs after all. On top of this, there is the added unease of Voyager working alongside the Borg, a species notoriously dangerous, whose only vision of cooperation is the assimilation of other life forms. The first part of this two-parter is the eerier of the two, with the gradual reveal of the damage done by Species 8472 from the destroyed fleet of cubes to the dismembered pile of Borg, before the attack on Harry Kim that leaves him being digested by invasive tendrils. The motivation of these aliens too gets explored later on in the series, but their initial introduction sees them as determined to remove the infection that is life in our universe. 1. Sees the stoic and resilient character of 7 of 9 uncover a new fear of her own in the process of saving the vessel: loneliness. The crew approaches a dangerous Utara-class nebula that emits lethal radiation, and they're faced with a massive detour or going into stasis while they pass through it, a journey taking a month. Boredom is not the issue, as running a ship with only 2 people proves to have a myriad of tasks to accomplish. But even a busy person, especially one who used to be telepathically linked to a collective of billions, eventually suffers from the lack of contact with others. After 29 days, she begins to have auditory hallucinations, and even encounters a strange traveller crossing the nebula too, but it's unclear if this Tragus is even real, a figment of Seven's imagination, or a mixture of both. Things get worse for her when she begins to fully imagine her responsibilities and fears of rejoining the collective, and it all mounts and the hallucinations increase, exacerbated by the effects of the nebula. Nothing is quite as scary as the fears we make for ourselves. Phantasms is a similar episode that sees Lieutenant Commander Data subjected to strange nightmares from his dream program. These are full of unsettling imagery, but more than that, things begin to creep into his waking world too, with reminders of the dream and even hallucinations. However, as an artificial being, there is the added layer of a technological problem, or the evolution of his positronic brain into a more naturally functioning one. A prospect which he approaches with optimism, seeing it as a sign of personal growth. However, these issues get worse when he is overcome with the urge to attack Councillor Troy, and does so. seemingly becoming violent without conscious control of his actions. Turns out that there's actually interphasic leeches feeding on the crew that are perceivable by data but only at a subconscious level, which is what the nightmares were about, and his attack on Troy was not on her, but the leech infecting her shoulder. All ends up being explained, but it's still the strange visions and losing grip on reality that makes for a haunting story. I am noticing a theme developing here, where a lot of the most unnerving episodes I can think of are less to do with an external threat or creature and more to do with the mind. Speaking of, Frame of Mind sees a Commander Riker rehearsing for a play in the role of a madman in a twisted mental institute, but right away things are off as elements of it begin to leak into the real world. Not only this, but memories of this are transposed into his mind, and he remembers both time on the Enterprise and as a patient in the Institute for Mental Disorders. The unsettling thing is, like a dream, whichever reality he finds himself in at the time feels like the real one, and looking into it, he cannot find answers. And as an audience, we are aware something is not right, but even we, from our outside perspective, cannot identify exactly what it is. Eventually, it is revealed that he had been abducted and subjected to an invasive brain scan to obtain information, and the visions were based on his recent memories of the performance, so everything we had witnessed from the opening was a fabrication. And the episode ends with Riker escaping back to the Enterprise. Of course, the top pick for me has to be schisms. The threat that can strike at any time and anywhere, and was undetected for so long, it really gets to me, based on the fear of abduction and the lack of control over the events that the crew initially have until discovered. It reinforces the idea that even in an age of aliens and exploration of the stars, there are some things out there that are unknown and, quite frankly, malevolent. Many of these scary episodes of Star Trek ultimately resolve with answers to the cause of the unsettling experiences, another mystery solved, but Schisms comes without many of those certainties, and definitely leaves things open and suggestive that this was not the last time we would see any of these other life forms from deep in subspace. I think it's scarier too because it ties into a more cosmic horror as these entities dwell out of sight and in another realm, one that Starfleet is reliant on, and thus in no danger of disappearing entirely. Other works have picked up where this episode has left off, but so far we have seen nothing in canon since their initial creepy appearance. So, that's my 9 picks for the unsettling, scary or haunting episodes of Star Trek. I guess it says more about me that the more terrifying aspects are not the monsters or aliens, most of the time, but the events that make me question the mind and reality. This was supposed to be a bit of Halloween fun, but now I'm coming to some more realizations about my own phobias, so I need to go. I've been Rick, and thanks for watching. I've spooked myself out now, so until next time, goodbye.